No more bullshit. No more bullshit.
Columbia University is finally taking disciplinary action after anti-Israel protesters took over the campus nearly 1 year ago. Alexis McAdams is live with their punishments. What do you know, Alexis?
Hey, Dana. Well, last time I was standing in front of Hamilton Hall here on Columbia University's campus, it was months ago. And when I looked behind me, I saw masked protesters breaking into that glass and going in there, saying they weren't going to leave the campus until the university completely divested from Israel. Well, it only took nearly a year, Dana, but now those student protesters finally facing disciplinary action. Watch. That was just some of what we saw. Now Barnard College, which is part of Columbia University, has expelled one student and suspended another for being part of that violent takeover. Back in April, mass protesters smashed the windows and destroyed everything they could get their hands on inside that school on the Ivy League campus. The punishment comes just days after Barnard kicked out 2 students for disrupting a history of Israel class in January. They threw around all these anti-Semitic flyers. Now the Department of Justice will visit 10 campuses dealing with anti-Semitic protests.
That's not free speech. These are criminals harassing and tormenting Jewish Americans. That's going to stop. If the district attorneys don't do it, the U.S. Attorney's Office will file hate crime charges.
So President Trump's threatening to imprison agitators. He posted this on Truth Social this morning. All federal funding will stop for any college, school, or university that allows illegal protests. Agitators will be imprisoned or permanently sent back to the country from which they came. American students will be permanently expelled or, depending on the crime, arrested. No mask. So back out here live, it's a much different response from this administration, so we'll keep an eye on it.
Let me ask you this, okay?
Yes.
How many Dodge Rams do you see driving around Europe? Okay. How many Dodge Rams do you see driving around India? I mean, not many, I bet. Why? Because they don't buy our cars. And that's what President Trump is trying to change. Maybe Dodge should start building them here and selling them here.
All right. Well, Fox Business host Maria Bartiromo has some very strong thoughts for Dodge after Fox Business reporter decided to interview a dealership owner who said that the tariffs that Trump has implemented would absolutely raise prices in the United States. And today, looks like Trump was willing to do a little peace agreement with 2 of the countries that he slapped with tariffs. We're going to give you the details on that in just a minute. But before we get to that, let's see what the dealership owner had to say that riled Bartiromo up so much.
Some of them are made in Michigan. Some are made in Mexico. Those are going to get a whole lot more expensive going forward. And it's not just the trucks and the vehicles that are made in Mexico, but all of the parts that come from Mexico and Canada and go back and forth across the border. David Kelleher is David Auto, Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram.
Yeah.
Impact.
Dramatic. I sold order for a customer, $80,000 truck. It's $100,000 now. So he's not going to buy the truck. It's going to sit on my lot at the higher interest rates we're paying right now for floor plan, and nobody's going to buy the truck because it just had a $20,000 price increase.
Right. Kelley Blue Book will put the number up. They say the average vehicle will go up by about $3,000. Does it sound right to you?
No, it will not. We don't have the broad stroke. We don't have the linear, the tight strokes. But to me, it's a 25% tariff. So that affects our parts that come from over these countries, and a whole bunch of our cars.
I mean, look, Trump implemented 25% tariffs on all imports from Canada and Mexico, with the exception of oil. We obviously rely on Canada for our oil needs. And so he's like, 10% tariff on Canadian oil, right? So, but everything else, 25% tariff. Obviously, obviously that is going to lead to price increases because the car companies aren't going to absorb the added costs of the tariffs. They're going to pass that on to consumers. Now, in some cases, they might divvy up the inflated costs, but at the end of the day, your prices are going to go up. Why is Maria Bartiromo pretending to be surprised by this, John?
Because her job is to both protect markets, but also Fox and Trump. So like if she's protecting the markets, then she should be more critical of this. But if she attacks Trump and his policy, then she'll probably be fired. And so she's sort of caught between a rock and a dumb place. She kind of has to oppose this and say a lot of stupid stuff. I love her point that like, how many Dodges do you see in India? Not a lot, I'd bet, because she doesn't know and she didn't look into it. But I agree with her. There probably aren't a lot. But like maybe she could think for like a second why that is. Maybe it's not just like hatred or whatever. Maybe we don't make cars that are appealing to other people around the world because they have different safety standards, different emission standards. Maybe we make them mostly for looks and way oversized and also way too expensive when they value more economical cars. Like these are the sorts of things that on a business network you'd probably want to talk about. But I don't have the tight strokes of that to necessarily say. But
yeah,
but anyway,
let me jump in real quick and hold that thought, because in the case of India, it is true that they have imposed very, very high tariffs in regard to American cars being imported in. So yeah, in some cases, countries do have high tariffs, but what ends up happening is if the price of the American vehicles that are being imported end up being too expensive, people aren't going to buy the American cars. You get what I'm saying? So in this case, you have American car companies, relying on foreign countries for parts or even manufacturing the American cars in foreign countries. And so you have a situation in which American cars end up being too costly for Americans to buy because of how the system works and because of the tariffs that Trump theoretically is implementing. Theoretical, I'll explain why in a minute.
Yeah, the only other thing I want to add is something that I brought up on my show, which I haven't seen business networks talk about, and I don't think that you will, because it concerns a topic that they're supposed to pretend not to be aware of, which is, you rightly point out the various reasons why necessarily prices will go up by some amount. But I want everyone to remember that that is not the only thing that will lead to higher prices. In an environment where there's this economic chaos, where everybody knows that prices are going up, what do corporations do? They raise them whether they have to or not because they can. They price gouge. And again, they're not gonna talk about that in the news. You don't talk about price gouging, but they will definitely do that even for product categories that are not facing tariffs. They're gonna raise their prices. And so Trump is providing the cover for them to do that across the entire economy.
So the president is deploying strategic tariffs to level the playing field and put America first, but not everyone on Wall Street is happy. But still, the argument remains. America needs an economy that protects America's interests, not just Wall Street.
The short-termism is what's killing us as a nation. Wall Street's interests are not always aligned with Main Street's interests. Wall Street is only concerned about Main Street as a consumer. All you want to do is keep the golden goose fat, but when does the golden goose get some of the gold?
The writing has been on the wall. Businesses are already making adjustments. Just this morning, Walmart demanding price cuts from Chinese suppliers to offset tariffs. U.S. toy factories seeing a surge in demand. Bitcoin jumping after President Trump announcing exemptions on certain tariffs. Meanwhile, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is delivering his keynote at the Economic Club of New York. We will be watching for his take on the economic impact and for questions from our very own Larry Kudlow. But still, the question remains. Are these headwinds or are they tailwinds pushing the U.S. towards a stronger, fairer trade deal? That's where I want to go with David Bahnsen, because we know typically you want a free market that works in a perfect world, right, with no tariffs. But we don't live in a perfect world. How do you feel about this?
The fact that we don't live in a perfect world is why I feel so strongly about this, because I believe governmental involvement makes an imperfect world more imperfect. I don't believe in a utopian vision where the government can centrally plan what the right prices are to be paid amongst economic actors. The people that I want to set a price are those with skin in the game, those who are actually participating in a transaction. And I don't believe that tariffs facilitate that. And ultimately, this whole argument that this is all being done towards getting to a better deal deal, I'm totally open to that argument. If it's all negotiation and so forth, we'll let it play out. But that's not what's being said. It's being said that Canada's ripping us off because they sell us more stuff than we sell them. I got my hair cut this morning. I have never sold her anything. And she has constantly cut my hair. And I don't think it's an unfair transaction. And that's the analogy I use all the time, because when it comes to a country selling us things, it takes willing, free buyers and sellers.
But what about if the other country isn't free? Howard Lutnick this morning was making comments where he said in aggregate, about on average-ish, China puts about a 50% tariff on our goods. So if the other side isn't playing fair, we have to respond, do we not?
But that example you use makes my point. Why are we using a China example when we're talking about Canada and Mexico? So let's discuss China about China. Let's discuss Canada about Canada. By poisoning the well, by cross-pollinating them all together, it's making the conversation harder, not easier.
He says at the end of this description of these two groups, he says the president loved listening to the trade warriors to drive his agenda, but he needed the others to keep him from driving into a ditch. I think he still has kind of a balance represented by Kevin Hassett on the one side, and Peter Navarro is still there on the other side. So you do have a balance. And in the end, if the markets continue to react as they have been the past few days, I think that's going to click for Donald Trump. And I think he's going to make more of an effort to make a deal with Mexico and Canada. And by the way, Mexico and Canada are a little nervous. For all their brouhaha about we're standing tough and everything, they have a lot more to lose from a trade war than we do.
Your envoy, Steve Witkoff, told us a little while ago that if Hamas does not release hostages, that the U.S. and Israel could take some action. What does that mean in your eyes? Is that military action? Would you join strikes with Israel?
Well, you're going to find out. I had the honor of spending a lot of time yesterday with quite a few of the people that we got out, and I can't believe how badly treated they were, really badly treated. Stories that you wouldn't even believe. Some of it was documented, some of it was so bad you couldn't really, I don't think you can put it on. And it's a shame. And they said one thing, that they have 59 hostages, of which many of them are killed. They want to know if we could just continue. They said without us, look, Biden wasn't able to get anybody out. We came along and they started releasing. But we have 59 left, of which 24 are living. The rest are dead. And I put out a statement. It's sort of self-explanatory, I think. But somebody's going to have to get a lot rougher than they're getting. It's a shame. And those 24 that are living, because they were with them just 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, depending on when they got out. But they said they're in very bad shape.
As a follow-up, the other night, we saw Democrats' behavior during your joint address to Congress.
Yeah.
Do you think it shows just how out of touch they are with the American people, especially given that 79%, according to a CBS poll, approved of your
I love this guy. Who are you with?
My name's Nick Gilbertson with Breitbart News.
I see. I really liked your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Sir, regarding the executive order.
The answer is just, Nick, just to, and I know your name very well. Good job, you do.
Thank you.
Yeah, the answer is I thought it was very embarrassing for the Democrats what happened the other night. And that's not said for any other reason other than it's obvious, it's fact. Even CNN fake news said that. They came out and they said it. And worse than CNN is MSDNC, which is the worst. And the good news is very few people watch them anymore. They have lost such credibility. And frankly, what Nicole Wallace said, I've never been a fan of hers, and she's not very talented. But I'll tell you, what she said the other day about that young man is disgraceful. She should be forced to resign. And Rachel Maddow should be forced to resign. Nobody watches her anyway. I don't know if it's not possible they pay her as much money as I hear, but certainly she's lost all credibility, both of them. But what they said the other day, they should be forced to resign about that young person.
The president is expected to sign an executive order as soon as this week, dismantling the education department.
Nancy Cordes joins us now from the White House. And Nancy, why is the president so focused on putting this one department out of business?
Well, Maurice, President Trump says this is all about sending the power back to the states so they can make their own decisions about education. One problem with that, though, is that the Department of Education actually doesn't have any say right now in what is taught in local schools. By law, that is left to the states. Here's what the Department of Education does do, though. It's essentially a pass-through for billions of dollars that go to help schools educate students with disabilities, help schools in low-income areas, and, of course, billions to help low-income students go to college through grants and loans. We've seen a draft of the executive order that he's expected to sign, and it's still very unclear how all those funds would get dispersed if this agency is radically downsized.
Nancy, the agency was created by Congress, funded by Congress. Can he do this?
Technically, he can't close it entirely. Congress created the agency, so Congress would have to eliminate it. But even Linda McMahon, the Secretary of Education, while acknowledging that that is true, is saying that she wants to radically downsize. And as we've seen with USAID, John, you don't have to officially shutter an agency in order to essentially gut it. If you cut thousands of staffers, if you cut thousands of programs, you can achieve the same effect. And just like with USAID, all of this is likely to end up in the courts.
One for Canada, one for Mexico.
Yes. It's a timeout for tariffs. President Trump pausing his tax on most Mexican imports for 1 month. Canada also was granted a tariff delay by the president.
We just weren't treated right. We were ripped off as a country. I've been saying it for a long time.
This as stocks plunged when the market opened Thursday over all the uncertainty and have been on a roller coaster since new 25% tariffs went into effect Tuesday. Republicans say it's all part of the process. The president has been negotiating and adjusting his policies as needed.
Listen, the president's a business guy. He's going to monitor the data and make adjustments as necessary. You've already seen some of that. But the goal is clear. Reduce the flow of fentanyl, make sure we got a fair deal.
The delay applying to products covered by the USMCA Free Trade Treaty. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick saying those goods will not have a tariff until April 2nd, while defending the president's threat of future tariffs.
People just don't understand the power of America in the hands of Donald Trump is going to be amazing.
This as Canada says the tariffs overall need to stop.
I think the American people are beginning to understand that a tariff war with Canada, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. This actually causes more pain than benefit.
And on April 2nd, President Trump has pledged to impose reciprocal tariffs on all nations that have duties on U.S. imports.
President Trump signing an executive order, we've been talking about it, to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Mackenzie Segalos joins us now with more. We talked about it earlier, and I don't know whether it's true or not, but it was in the teleprompter, so it must be true. But it was disappointment about some details of the Bitcoin reserve caused Bitcoin to go down yesterday.
Yeah, the crypto market has been plunging since last night on that.
Do we know that it was because of what they said? Or, I mean, Bitcoin, moves 30% when, does that in its sleep sometimes, over a period. Was there disappointment? If so, what was the disappointment?
The big expectation was that we would see some sort of Bitcoin purchasing plan in tandem with the announcement of a strategic Bitcoin reserve. But the language in that executive order was very specific about it just meaning that we would hold on to what was already seized in criminal operations rather than roll out any sort of taxpayer dollars into a buying scheme.
Who wants that? No one wants taxpayer dollars going into buy.
Senator Lummis put forth a bill last year where you'd buy 1 million Bitcoin over the course of 5 years. You'd hold on to that for 20 years and periodically sell it off to pay down the, multi-trillion-dollar deficit.
Why? We've sold in the past when we've come across some Bitcoin one way or another. And we sold it when it would have bought a pizza, and now it would buy a building.
Well, and that goes to the larger thesis here. Some people are actually pleased to see that we would have this, strategy where the U.S. government would hold on to Bitcoin, because the benefit here, the argument is that it would be a hedge against inflation because there's this capped supply of 21 million tokens. Right. And so if you have that backing up the U.S. dollar, it would protect against inflationary pressures. It would hit other fiat currencies. There's also this idea that it would diversify what we already have in our national reserves, other assets like a gold that might be more sensitive to central bank policies. What I will say, though, Bitcoin moves on Fed decisions. When the rate is hiked or is cut, Bitcoin price responds.
Plus, governments around the world are not unanimous in believing Bitcoin is anything at this point. Well, maybe we are. There's still people that don't believe it's actually a store of value. There's people that still argue it could go to zero.
Yeah, but there are a lot of members of the G20 who might follow suit. And I was talking to Brian Armstrong last night ahead of this summit today, and he's one of the members who's been advising the Trump transition team since the campaign trail. And he made the point that he thinks a lot of countries are going to follow. I know of already Middle Eastern countries, Gulf states that have been looking into a Bitcoin buying strategy. There's also reportedly, conversations within the Chinese government to look to follow suit if the government in the U.S. makes this move to roll out a purchase plan.
But there is no purchase plan.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, if you have a strategic Bitcoin reserve, China used to be one of the epicenters for Bitcoin mining. It's very easy for them. They have all of this hydropower, and so they already have all the facilities, and they banned it a couple of years ago, but it takes nothing to turn it back on. And then, similar to Iran evading sanctions by just mining Bitcoin, they already have it on hand.
Right, but if we're not really buying it, right, we're not going to be buying it. You agree with that?
I think that right now we have around $17 billion worth of Bitcoin, and holding on to that is enough of a signal that other countries would follow suit. I think that there is an intention. Some of the language in that EO did say that if they could find budget neutral ways to add it to our balance sheet, they would investigate that. Now that, of course, stops short of a buying plan, but it signals that they're open to some way to do this if it doesn't take taxpayer dollars.
There are reports now that Russia says it will help the United States negotiate a nuclear deal with Iran. What kind of a deal with Iran do you want to do? You said they cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Yeah. Well, there are two ways Iran can be handled, militarily or you make a deal. I would prefer to make a deal because I'm not looking to hurt Iran. They're great people. I know so many Iranians from this country.
Well, not the leadership.
No, not the leadership.
The people.
They're very evil people. No, but the people of Iran are great people. But they had a tough regime. And they'd meet and they'd be shot in the streets. It was a tough deal. But I would rather negotiate a deal. I'm not sure that everybody agrees with me, but we can make a deal that would be just as good as if you won militarily. But the time is happening now. The time is coming up. Something's going to happen one way or the other. I hope that Iran, and I've written them a letter saying, I hope you're going to negotiate, because if we have to go in militarily, it's going to be a terrible thing for them.
You wrote a letter to the Khomeini,
yes.
the leader? When did you send the letter?
Yesterday.
And you said you better negotiate, or we want you to negotiate?
I didn't say you better. I said I hope you're going to negotiate, because it's going to be a lot better for Iran. And I think they want to get that letter. The other alternative is we have to do something, because you can't let them have a nuclear weapon.
On Friday, the Trump administration canceled $400 million of federal funding to Columbia University over its inaction to combat rampant anti-Semitism on campus. Well, I'm joined by Columbia Assistant Professor Shai Davidai, who has become the face of the pro-Israel movement on campus. Shai, what do you think about this move from President Trump?
Well, I have to say, it's regardless of what you think of the president, you agree with the president, you disagree with the president made promises. The president made certain attempts to let the universities know that this will come if they won't step up their game. They refused to step up their game, and now the president is following up on his promises and giving them the consequences. That's what it's like being in a democracy.
I, McMahon, do solemnly swear that I will defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter. So help me God. Congratulations.
Rocky election season and contentious confirmation hearing. Former Oregon Congresswoman Lori Chavez-DeRemer was confirmed today by the full Senate as President Trump's labor secretary.
Now let's bring in COIN political director Ken Boddy, who's been following this ever since President Trump announced Chavez-DeRemer as his labor secretary pick.
Well, it's been a real roller coaster ride politically for Lori Chavez-DeRemer. She lost to Democrat Congresswoman Janelle Bynum in November. That flipped the state's 5th congressional district blue. But then she was nominated as President Trump's labor secretary. And when he nominated her, he said, quote, "I look forward to working with her to create tremendous opportunity for American workers and expand training and apprenticeships to grow wages and improve working conditions to bring back our manufacturing jobs." Well, her confirmation process got tougher as she had to defend her support of the PRO Act, which would have made it easier for workers to unionize. She did walk back some of her support of that bill, saying that now she supports state right-to-work laws, which means workers can choose not to pay union dues or even join a union. The vote comes at a time when the White House is eliminating the jobs of thousands of federal government workers, including at the Labor Department. Today's vote in the Senate was 66-30 to confirm Chavez-DeRemer. 4 did not vote. Oregon Senators Wyden and Merkley voted against her confirmation, as did Washington State Senators Maria Cantwell and Patty Murray. Obviously, that didn't make a difference in her being confirmed.
Challenger and Gray this morning announcing job cuts to our 245%. We're talking 172,000, of which 62,000 from the government. My next guest says those cuts are necessary. I want to bring in now Kobasi Letter Editor-in-Chief Adam Kobasi. And Adam, so explain why, in your mind, streamlining our government actually is a positive.
Look, I mean, I think right now, for the last, basically as long as we can remember, deficit spending has been an issue. It's accelerated now. It's definitely worse than it was really at any point in history since, other than the pandemic. And we've tried the other side of this, which is raising revenue. You can't raise revenue enough. You have to cut spending. And I think right now you're finally starting to see some spending cuts. Obviously, there's a long way to go. But you mentioned that Challenger Gray data this morning. This is a crazy statistic that U.S. government job cuts were up 41,000% year over year. Last year, from January 1st to right now, March to the beginning of March, we only saw 150 job cuts in the U.S. government. This year, there was 65,000. So I think you're starting to see the beginning of something big, but there's also a long way to go.
Now to President Trump's efforts to downsize the government and the new limits he's placing tonight on Elon Musk. Trump saying he wants to cut the federal workforce down with a scalpel, not a hatchet. Gabe Gutierrez tonight with the late developments at the White House.
2 weeks after Elon Musk waved a chainsaw to symbolize his Department of Government Efficiency's plans to shred federal spending, tonight President Trump says he wants a more measured approach.
I want the cabinet members to keep good people. I don't want to see a big cut where a lot of good people are cut.
The president posting DOGE has been an incredible success, but for future downsizing, cabinet secretaries will be in charge and can be very precise as to who will remain and who will go, using a scalpel instead of a hatchet. The new limits on Musk come after some cabinet members had told their employees not to respond to Musk's directives to list their accomplishments.
Elon and the group are going to be watching them, and if they can cut, it's better. And if they don't cut, then Elon will do the cutting.
The president also saying today he spoke with advisors about eliminating the Department of Education.
Well, I want to just do it. I mean, we're starting the process. We're trying to get the schools back into the states. Let the states run the schools.
Education is already largely run by state and local governments. Just 8% of funding comes from the feds. But the department distributes billions of federal dollars to schools and manages federal student loans. The president says scrapping it would mean that responsibility might fall to other agencies.
I don't think the education should be handling the loans. That's not their business.
He argues abolishing the department could help bring up low test scores by sending federal money back to states in block grants. In Louisiana, State Superintendent of Education Cade Brumley supports that idea.
We would welcome the opportunity here within the state of Louisiana to have more control
and more say over the way in which students are educated.
While Heather Stanbaugh, a high school teacher in rural Ohio, worries any loss of federal funds would harm low-income families.
Any number of those teachers, those aides that work with those students every day, if we can't find a way to recoup those funds, they are in absolute jeopardy.
The president cannot wipe out an entire federal agency without Congress, but the administration may look for ways to defund specific programs instead.
We say the scalpel rather than the hatchet. The combination of them, Elon, DOGE, and other great people will be able to do things at a historic level. And that post followed a cabinet meeting that seemed like it did not go well for Musk. More Perfect Union reports, Trump told the cabinet today that they're in charge of their departments, not Elon Musk. According to two administration officials, Trump said that Musk can make recommendations, but not issue unilateral decisions on staffing and policy. Musk was also in the room. So Jake, do you think Elon is going to listen to Trump's instructions?
Well, I'm not sure he has a choice, but if he has a choice, then that means he really is the president. Okay, we're gonna discuss why they did this and what it could mean in a second. But first, scalpel instead of a hatchet. I feel like I heard that somewhere before. Can you guys pull up where we might have heard that before? What is not smart is, let's just fire everybody at the Department of Energy, even though they work with nukes, and then see how it turns out. That is super stupid. Because guys, let's say I'm a right winger and I want to do this right. I wouldn't come in with a hatchet. I would say scalpel rather than a hatchet. Interesting. But I said that on the Young Turks. I mean, if I said that on a right wing show, he might have heard it. Or in any collaboration at all. Well, let's see what if something was said earlier this week.
Look, as you and I have talked about a little bit before, including on Merit Street TV earlier today, he's taking a machete when I think he should be taking a scalpel. So I'm against waste, fraud, and abuse. We've been against it for 20 straight years. You can't stand it. Subsidies going out the door, usually to the donor class. Whoever donates to Democrats or Republicans, they get it back tenfold, 100-fold, et cetera. But if we're cutting before we even see what we're cutting, then by definition, to me, it can't be the right cuts.
We all agree with what you just said, that we don't like fraud, we don't like waste. There's just bloat, fat in government. We all agree with that, right? Nobody disagrees with that. Everybody agree that is fat? Okay, and what I raised my hand when I said I like DOGE, and I've been calling them out on some of the stuff that they're doing. If you make a mistake, if you, like you say, if you cut something like with veterans, or you cut things with the elderly who need medications or whatever, then you find that, you need to put it back that day. You don't need to say, okay, well, we'll study this for 60 days. No, you put it back right now.
That's interesting. And in another appearance we did on Merit TV together, Dr. Phil also said maybe a scalpel instead of a hatchet.
That boy is good.
From Newswire, it's from the Bloomberg TV wire. This is funny because I saw this headline from Newswire, and when you read the AP headlines, there is key context missing in their stories. The title is, DOGE effort to sell off federal properties inadvertently exposes CIA black site in Northern Virginia. Bloomberg TV reporting.
Oh, yeah.
Massively viral story. Now, what happens when you actually try to Google search it is not a whole lot comes up. But we do have this story. Trump administration deletes list of hundreds of federal buildings targeted for potential sale. So, okay, here's Bloomberg. The DOGE effort to sell a federal property inadvertently exposes CIA black sites. AP reports they delete the list of federal buildings for sale. They don't give you the context of why it was deleted. The Trump administration Tuesday published a list of more than 440 federal properties it identified to potentially offload, including the FBI headquarters and the main DOJ building, after deeming them not core to government operations. Hours later, however, the admin issued a revised list with only 320 entries. And by Wednesday morning, the list was gone entirely. Non-core property list coming soon. The GSA, which published the list, did not respond to repeated questions about the changes or why the properties had been listed, why the properties that had been listed had been removed. But now we know why. And I think it's absolutely hilarious. It's because the CIA was operating buildings off the books. and whoops.
Yeah, and the CIA is not supposed to. I mean, this is obvious to most people, but the CIA is not supposed to be operating in a
domestically,
a fashion like that domestically. So, I like the fact, obviously, that this has been exposed. Yep. I do hope that it leads to more investigations as to what exactly they were doing, and I hope that becomes public so the American people know what the CIA was doing in the U.S. Like, I do think that it's acceptable to have an intelligence bureau working internationally, but I don't think I also think that it's unacceptable to have them working in the United States. There is an FBI for that reason, for when it comes to federal crimes, which there should actually be few federal crimes, in my opinion. There shouldn't be a lot of crimes that the federal government actually investigates, kidnapping, those kind of things. You know, maybe interstate drug trafficking or international drug trafficking, et cetera. But otherwise, there shouldn't be a lot of crimes that the feds actually have to investigate, because that's what we have states for. That's why we have state police. That's why we have municipal police. There are multiple police agencies. The federal government doesn't need all the policing agencies that it has. And furthermore, things like the EPA don't need an actual police force. Right. That's what the FBI is for. Mm-hmm. You don't need to have a federal police force for for HUD. Yeah. But every organ, they all do. I mean, the FDA has police force. That's why they have SWAT teams that kick in the doors of people that are selling raw milk.
That's fucked up, man.
Well, we're going to end up fighting about this one, Niall. Let's get to it. One of the most frequently recurring revelations of the last several years is that the mainstream media is desperately out of touch with ordinary Americans. Our elite commentator class reflexively trusts the expert consensus, even when experts discredit themselves, as they did with COVID. The consensus wants to promote progressive social and cultural policies that vast majorities of people find deeply off-putting, and they display an endless appetite for American military interventionism in far-flung regions of the earth. The voters keep trying to tell the people in charge they just want America first. They want to be largely left alone. They don't want language and behavior overly policed. They want a social safety net and for government to, yes, prioritize fixing problems at home, not try to become the world policeman or send billions of dollars overseas for unclear reasons. But the MSM exists in a bubble. And so every time the majority of Americans speak up and make their priorities clear, the bubble briefly bursts, then is desperately reconstructed. I swear, every week there's some new poll showing that a majority of people agree with President Trump on some policy, foreign policy, the border, federal spending, etc. Each and every time, the media is shocked to learn this. Every time. Last week was no different. We've been assured over and over again by the media that what Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency are doing is very, very unpopular. Surely Americans are moved by the plight of the laid-off federal workers. Surely they think Elon is cutting vital government programs. People must want an end to this madness. This is not what they voted for. And on and on and on it goes. There's only one way to settle this, of course. It's actually do a poll. CNN pollster Harry Enton, a mainstream media figure who actually just does his job and does it quite well, reports the facts that he gathers. Well, he parsed the numbers, and guess what? Take a look.
This to me was one of the more shocking figures that I saw. Made me go, wait a minute, hold on one second. Whoa, Americans on Trump and Joe's efforts. Musk and DOGE should influence government spending and operations. Look at this. 54%. The majority say that he and they should. How about approve of Trump trying to cut staff at government agencies? Again, you get a majority here. 51%. So yeah, Elon Musk might not be that popular, but these cuts and the idea of spending cuts, at least within the federal government and cutting at government agencies, that actually has majority support. I was truly surprised by this, Kate, but the numbers are the numbers.
Well, there is a view that cuts across Democrat and Republican of people thinking that Washington is too big, bloated federal government, waste, fraud, and abuse. I mean, those are drain the swamp is what people run on over and over again. How do they feel? What do they think they're actually cutting?
Yeah, what do they think they're actually cutting? Democrats want to argue that the type of spending that Musk is cutting is mainly necessary programs. But that comes in at just 36%. The wasteful spending actually wins the plurality here at 42%, according to a recent Washington Post Ipsos poll. And I think that is the reason why you see that when it comes to Musk and DOGE, you see, in fact, the majority believe he should have some influence because they believe, the plurality believe, that he is cutting wasteful spending, not necessary programs that Democrats are arguing.
Survey says a majority of people agree with Trump and Elon that DOGE is doing important work. Dusk and Moj. 54% want Elon to continue to influence public policy. 51% want the dynamic duo to cut government agency. Now look, it's true. 51% is not some massive supermajority in our polarized times. It's actually hard to get a supermajority for anything, frankly. Keep in mind though, Trump's popular vote win, it was just about 50%, actually was a smidge under at 49.8%, according to the latest numbers I could find. So the media's narrative is that these DOGE cuts are politically ruinous, that people who voted for Trump are horrified by what he's doing and they're ready to turn on him. But actually the cuts enjoy slightly more support than Trump himself got in the election, which suggests to me the reverse is true. Even some people who didn't vote for Trump nevertheless do want the GOP and DOGE to cut waste, fraud, and abuse.
Tonight, a change in the Trump administration. NBC reports there are new plans underway to go after undocumented families and children in a new operation.
NBC6 politics reporter Hansel Vela joins us from Little Havana with how immigrant advocates are reacting.
We're here at Domino Park in Little Havana because this is where immigration advocates wanted to come together to denounce what's happening at the national level when it comes to immigration policy. But tonight they're also reacting to these new plans being reported by NBC News. NBC has now learned about new Trump administration plans of nationwide operations that will now target undocumented families and unaccompanied children, even those who do not have criminal records.
As an immigrant woman,
this afternoon, a coalition of groups spoke on behalf of undocumented immigrants.
Their words and actions fuel division, hate, and fear.
The operation, according to NBC News, will target adults and minor children who entered the country together and have orders of deportation. When arrested, families will be placed in detention before they are deported. During the 2024 campaign, President Donald Trump promised deportations would only focus on criminals.
Families that find solace in the United States now face the cruel possibility of being torn apart.
These groups also denouncing the end of temporary protective status for 1.1 million Venezuelans and Haitians, including this young woman.
We are legal, we are working, we pay our taxes, and we contribute to this economy.
Then there's the likely cancellation of the parole program, which affects more than 500,000 Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans.
This is also cruel, inhumane, and another way to try to leave immigrants illegally in the United States in order to make them subjects of deportation.
Whether it's CPS or the parole program, we know that there's separate lawsuits that have already been filed, making their way through the court system now. Reporting from Miami's Little Havana neighborhood, I'm Hansel Vela, NBC6 News.
Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem exclusively telling Fox News she is taking action after identifying 2 internal leakers within the agency.
We have identified 2 leakers of information here at the Department of Homeland Security who have been telling individuals about our operations and putting law enforcement lives in jeopardy. We plan to prosecute these 2 individuals and hold them accountable for what they've done. And we're going to continue to do all that we can to keep America safe.
We are going to stay in Inglewood, California right now as 2 murder suspects accused of killing a Good Samaritan in Los Angeles County, California, were in the country illegally and do have lengthy criminal records. That is according to information that was obtained by Fox News. Juan Miguel Sanchez was killed February 25th in the LA suburb of Inglewood as he attempted to stop 2 men from stealing his neighbor's catalytic converter. The murder caught on surveillance camera that appeared to be from a nearby home. That is the victim right there on your screen. Now, the suspects, which were seen, police say in that surveillance video, those are the mugshots there, were identified by Inglewood police as Wilbur Alberto Rabinales and Jose Christian Saravia Sanchez, the 2 arrested by police Thursday. Police telling Fox News that Rabinales, a Guatemalan national, was arrested at least 15 times in the last few years in the country, predominantly on gun charges, grand theft, burglary, and drug charges. He does have multiple grand theft arrests, mostly for stealing catalytic converters, and past charges for multiple DUIs, conspiracy, felon in possession of a gun, possession of burglary tools, possession of meth, possession of stolen property, and felony hit and run during a police pursuit. Fox News also reporting Sanchez has been arrested at least a dozen times, mostly for grand theft, gun charges, drugs, burglary, kidnapping, possession of meth, and burglary tools. Fox has reached out to ICE, of course, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, for any additional information as details are kind of coming in. Now, the victim was shot in the chest after confronting the suspects while they were allegedly attempting to steal the catalytic converter. Again, you'll see that surveillance photo right there on your screen. Police say the suspects escaped in a car, later arrested at a motel about 15 miles east of Inglewood. The victim's sister said he would have turned 49 on April 4th. She said, quote, "You took a big part of our heart." That was in an interview with Fox 11 LA. Now, we're told the victim had left for work before 4 a.m. that morning because he wanted to get an early start at his job where he had just been promoted while working to clean up after the Palisades fire. His sister adding, quote, "He was a big man of faith, never missed Mass on Sunday. He volunteered Sunday mornings at church, and he was the sole provider for his family. Now he's gone, leaving my sister-in-law and 2 sons." The family telling Fox 11 the victim had told his wife that she should leave her job while she underwent chemotherapy after being diagnosed with cancer. Again, 2 men here in custody. Fox News saying they are in the country illegally. The investigation, of course, still ongoing, so we'll bring you all of the information as we do get it.
ICE agents arresting protest leader Mahmoud Halil. His attorney says the administration is moving to cancel his green card. Maya Sulkin is a Columbia graduate. She is a reporter and assistant editor for the Free Press, and so good to see you in person.
Thank you so
his
much
attorney says ICE's arrest and detention of Mahmoud follows the U.S. government's open repression of student activism and political speech, specifically targeting students at Columbia for criticism of Israel's assault on Gaza. Now, that's his attorney. How do you see it?
Thank you so much for having me. Listen, this is someone who has been the engine behind so much of the violence that we have seen on campus since October 7th. And so no one is telling Khalil and students like him that they cannot peacefully protest or even say things that we disagree with. But what is happening is violence, it is harassment, it is trespassing, it is causing thousands of dollars in property damage and sending public safety officers to the hospital. So we are not talking about free speech anymore. We are talking about crimes.
You graduated from Columbia, so you're very familiar with this. There is the head of the Columbia Jewish Alumni Association said every American citizen should be concerned when students are encouraging terrorist activities on U.S. soil. I agree. Was he encouraging terrorist activity? Was he just protesting Israel?
I mean, listen, in Milbank Hall just a few days ago and in Milstein Library, 3 days ago, he was handing out flyers from the Hamas media outlet, which is not an exaggeration, literally the Hamas logo on these flyers. Wow. I mean, these are people that call October 7th a glorious day. They are carrying Hamas flags. If that is not espousing terrorist activity, I really do not know it is.
I wanted to ask you about this because over the weekend, I think it was Friday, the Trump administration canceled $400 million in federal funds. Here's what John Fetterman, the senator from Pennsylvania, supporter of Israel, said. Columbia let anti-Semitism run amok to cater to lunatic fringe and paid provocateurs. Leadership allowed those a-holes to take over the campus and terrorize Jewish students. Now Columbia pays for its failure, and I support that. What did you hear about this? Was it a wake-up call for Columbia that maybe there's a monetary cost to what they're doing?
Listen, I think this is very much a follow-through on the threats they have gotten. I think it for sure came as a surprise, but like the senator said, the federal government has no obligation to pay American tax dollars to an institution that is violating the civil rights of its students, and that is what happened. And in fact, they have an obligation to not pay an institution that is violating the civil rights of its students.
Columbia's got a lot of money. It's got a huge endowment. If the government takes $400 million away from your former school, now being an alum, what's the impact on Columbia, Maya?
Honestly, this is, one, it's a message, and two, as you said, there's an enormous endowment. They have $5 billion in government funding. And so really this is about professors not being able to conduct the research they're able to conduct. It's about not attracting the top talent because the school will no longer be able to provide the kind of funding, the kind of benefits that universities with federal funding can provide.
CNN forced to issue correction to Trump fact check after false claim Biden admin did not spend $8 million on transgender mice. This claim needs context. CNN was forced to issue a correction Wednesday after they falsely fact-checked President Trump's claim that the federal government under former President Biden had spent $8.2 million on gender-affirming hormone treatments in mice. The funding was funneled through the National Institutes of Health, but CNN's Deirdre McPhillips clapped back at the president, saying that the experiments were only carried out on monkeys and that it amounted to a mere $500,000. Turns out she and CNN were mistaken. It was the White House that pointed that out. Under the Biden administration, the National Institute for Health doled out millions of dollars in taxpayer funded grants for institutions across the country to perform transgender experiments on mice. The White House said in a statement before laying out some shocking examples of egregious spending. CNN had originally reported that Trump had falsely claimed that the Department of Government Efficiency identified government spending $8 million making mice transgender. In the reporting, they had cited 3 studies. So I don't know if they have the actual image, but we also have this from Fox. CNN edits fact check saying Trump falsely claimed there were trans experiments on mice. This story was huge. It was a couple of weeks ago. We went over the story. Quote, between 2021 and 22, NIH awarded a total of $477,000 to 3 projects that involved administering feminizing hormone therapy to monkeys to understand how it may affect their immune system. The fact check continued. Transgender women are nearly 50 times more likely to be infected with HIV than other adults, blah, blah, blah. We get it. There were also numerous studies where they gave cross-sex hormones to mice. The purpose of these studies, so what CNN first did was they were like, no, Trump's wrong. Then they went, well, okay, Trump's not wrong. It's just they weren't trying to make the mice transgender. They made them transgender so that they could do different experiments, which doesn't matter because that's not what Trump said. Jimmy Kimmel, who is either as dumb as a box of rocks or as evil, sorry, rocks, perhaps both, came out and lied, claiming he meant transgenic mice. No, he didn't. They made that up. And it's a weird, clever way to manipulate stupid people who don't pay attention. They say, Jimmy Kimmel continued to roast Trump on his talk show, blah, 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 saying $8 million on making mice transgender. This is real, to which Kimmel fired back, no, it's not real. You know that you hear the president of the United States say we're spending $8 million to do sex change operations on mice. You say, well, I'm sure he's exaggerating, but there must be something there. Turns out there's not. It's not real. The government spent money on transgenic mice, which are genetically modified mice they use in lab tests to study disease. It has nothing to do with being transgender other than the word. The trans part of the word, you think they know this and just ignore it, or are they so dumb they don't know how to Google? Or maybe they think we're so dumb we don't know how to Google. I don't know. Well, perhaps if Jimmy Kimmel read CNN, he'd realize Trump was meaning literally transgender mice. So we have stories like this in the Telegraph. Trump said the U.S. spent $8 million on transgender mice. He was right. Reeling off a list of examples of apparent misspending, which Trump said that $45 million has been on diversity, equity, inclusion, blah, blah, blah. The left wing said this, that, or otherwise. The White Coat Waste Project, a nonprofit campaign to stop animal testing, which investigates taxpayer-funded experiments on the effects of gender-affirming drugs in rodents. The president was referring to their investigation. Justin Goodman, senior vice president for the lobbying group, claimed it has documented over $250 million spent on transgender animal experiments over the last couple of decades. He added, there are over 24 active federal grants funding transgender animal experiments worth a total of $64 million. These include NIH-funded project at Duke University that allegedly received $455,000. In another experiment, scientists at the University of Michigan allegedly spent $2.5 million of a grant investigating the effects of hormone treatment in mice to imitate gender transition. So all they can do is lie.
What a bunch of dumbasses. Yeah, really.
This is simple program on therapeutic fiber. Head to Broadway by way of football, boxing,
Let me get your take on House Speaker Mike Johnson considering a motion to strip Congressman Al Green of committee assignments. The Texas Democrat acted out last week and was censured after heckling the president during his speech to the joint session of Congress. 10 Democrats broke party ranks to vote with all the Republicans on this, Congressman. This was a resolution brought by the House Freedom Caucus. Do you expect the Speaker to bring it to the floor this week?
I do, because, Congressman Green, who promised that he would accept his punishment, didn't. As a matter of fact, he disturbed the decorum on the House twice last week, once during the president's speech, and the second time when he was supposed to stand in the well of the House and just read the articles of censure against him. No, they started singing in the well of the House. This breaks all decorum. He should have his committee assignments removed, just like the Democrats did to a couple of Republicans in the last Congress.
Jasmine Crockett, we've been hitting her hard over the last couple of days. She's the new AOC. She looked at AOC. She said, how do I up this lunacy? And she has. Here she is going off on Mr. Elon, and she's also not happy with a certain Trump person.
If you could tell Donald Trump anything tonight, what would you tell him?
I would tell him to grow a spine and stop being Putin's hoe.
Nigga, please.
As it relates to X, he has never made a profit since he bought X. In fact, the value of X is 75% lower than it has ever been. So if I am going to go look for somebody to run a business, I'm going to look for someone who is going to run one successfully. And before people start screaming and yelling about, well, he's a billionaire. Yeah, when you know the right people and they'll just give you money, then you can become a billionaire too. And maybe one day all of us will have that kind of access. But until then.
She is so dumb. I think I said it before. She makes AOC look like Margaret Thatcher.
First, Governor Newsom sending shockwaves through the political sphere. The podcast exchange causing outrage among his own party.
Say no men in female sports.
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that.
Thanks for joining us here at 6. I'm Tony Lopez.
And I'm Marley Ginter. The governor breaking with Democrats on the debut episode of his new podcast, suggesting they were in the wrong by allowing transgender athletes to participate in female sports. Your reporter Madison Keevy has a breakdown of what he said and the backlash he's getting really from both parties on this one. Right, Madison?
Right, Marley, and we've heard that all day long, people coming out. You know, Governor Newsom has long been a champion for LGBTQ plus civil rights here in the state for decades, going against his own party many years ago to issue marriage licenses for same-sex couples. But as one expert put it to me today, he's now positioning himself as a new type of Democrat.
Would you do something like that? Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that.
The governor on the debut episode of his podcast, This is Gavin Newsom, in conversation with conservative political activist Charlie Kirk.
There's also a humility and a grace, that these poor people are more likely to commit suicide, have anxiety and depression. And the way that people talk down to vulnerable communities is an issue that I have a hard time with as well. So both things I can hold in my hand.
The governor's comments getting backlash from some of the state's top Democratic leaders, like State Senator Scott Wiener, part of the LGBTQ caucus.
It was just really sad to me, and it was like a gut punch for the governor to take that position. And I hope it's a one-off, and that he quickly comes back to his roots, which is to support the LGBTQ community.
Republicans took notice of the comments too. Assemblymember Bill Asaley wrote on X, quote, "Talk is cheap," and called on Newsom to sign legislation to match. Assemblymember Kevin Kiley echoed that call, that if the governor is serious, he should sign an executive order. I took those comments to the governor's office of concerns and questions that have since come out since that podcast was released. The governor's office pointed me back to the entirety of that more than an hour-long podcast episode, saying that he is not going to weaponize this issue or turn those kids into villains.
So Gavin values winning more than anything. He will change to win. The problem that he has not calculated, and he's normally a tactician when it comes to his party has not moved on. He's trying to move on to the general election. If this is the Gavin Newsom that has become moderate now, which I don't believe, it's all for politics, he won't win a Democratic primary, and you don't have to take my word for it. Brian, just look at the reaction action from the Democrats.
It's unbelievable. And I will say this is how insincere it is. He hasn't changed one thing.
No.
He's gone to bat for trans men and women's sports and made sure it stood there. So he makes this, by the way, he couched it by saying, I have great compassion. If you don't let them play, they'll commit suicide. But I agree with you, Charlie, which is totally not true. So Lori Lightfoot, I know you forgot about her, but I'll bring her back just for this moment. She says it's disgusting. There are kids waking up today in California with this news thinking that their governor hates them, and rightly so. As Charlie Kirk says, Politico has not one, not two, but 5 reporters covering the fallout of Gavin Newsom's comments about men and women's sports. But there's even more. Ro Khanna, who many people point to as somebody, a voice of reason on the left.
Democrat from California said this is a moment for Democrats to stand for the dignity of the trans community, the immigrant community, and the most vulnerable. Here are my thoughts.
He should have ended with women suck, right?
All he said was, it's not fair. Because men are stronger, and you have a biological man who is playing against a woman. There are so many examples of girls that have been hit by the volleyball, that have lost their scholarships because a biological male has taken it from them. So he's not saying he's anti-trans. And a lot of people who are against this because of fairness are not anti-trans. It's just they're saying it's not fair for my little girl to lose her scholarship to someone who is biologically stronger. And so if you read the New York Times, the Ipsos poll back in January found the vast majority of Americans, this is why Gavin Newsom is smart if he wants to win an election. Right. The vast majority of Americans, including most Democrats, do not think that trans athletes should compete in women's sports. They polled 2,128 people. 79% said biological men should not participate in women's sports. 67% of Democrats agreed with that, and 94% of Republicans. The trans girl community makes up a very small percentage of our population.
And to my fellow citizens, America is back. I return to this chamber tonight to report that America's momentum is back, our spirit is back, our pride is back, our confidence is back, and the American dream is surging bigger and better than ever before.
Mr. Green, take your seat. Take your seat, sir. Take your seat. Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber.
This is my 5th such speech to Congress. And once again, I look at the Democrats in front of me, and I realize there is absolutely nothing I can say to make them happy or to make them stand or smile or applaud. Nothing I can do. So Democrats sitting before me, for just this one night, why not join us in celebrating so many incredible wins for America? For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again. As you know, we inherited from the last administration an economic catastrophe and an inflation nightmare. Their policies drove up energy prices, pushed up grocery costs, and drove the necessities of life out of reach for millions and millions of Americans. They've never had anything like it. We suffered the worst inflation in 48 years, but perhaps even in the history of our country. They're not sure. As president, I'm fighting every day to reverse this damage and make America affordable again. And in the near future, I want to do what has not been done in 24 years, balance the federal budget. We're going to balance it. With that goal in mind, we have developed in great detail what we are calling the Gold Card, which goes on sale very, very soon. For $5 million, we will allow the most successful job-creating people from all over the world to buy a path to U.S. citizenship. It's like the green card, but better and more sophisticated. If you don't make your product in America, however, under the Trump administration, you will pay a tariff, and in some cases, a rather large one. Other countries have used tariffs against us for decades, and now it's our turn to start using them against those other countries. April 2nd, reciprocal tariffs kick in, and whatever they tariff us, other countries, we will tariff them. That's reciprocal, back and forth. Whatever they tax us, we will tax them. If they do non-monetary tariffs to keep us out of their market, then we will do non-monetary barriers to keep them out of our market. There's a lot of that, too. In 2018, DJ was diagnosed with brain cancer. The doctors gave him 5 months at most to live. That was more than 6 years ago. Since that time, DJ and his dad have been on a quest to make his dream come true, and DJ has been sworn in as an honorary law enforcement officer, actually a number of times. The police love him, the police departments love him. And tonight, DJ, we're going to do you the biggest honor of them all. I am asking our new Secret Service Director, Sean Curran, to officially make you an agent of the United States Secret Service. In the Middle East, we're bringing back our hostages from Gaza. In my first term, we achieved one of the most groundbreaking peace agreements in generations, the Abraham Accords. And now we're going to build on that foundation to create a more peaceful and prosperous future. Earlier today, I received an important letter from President Zelensky of Ukraine. The letter reads, Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer. Nobody wants peace more than the Ukrainians, he said. I appreciate that he sent this letter, just got it a little while ago. Simultaneously, we've had serious discussions with Russia and have received strong signals that they are ready for peace. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful? It's time to stop this madness. It's time to halt the killing. It's time to end this senseless war. If you want to end wars, you have to talk to both sides. My fellow Americans, get ready for an incredible future, because the golden age of America has only just begun. It will be like nothing that has ever been seen before. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.
One day later.
It was a presidential address unlike any other. President Trump was his best self at the joint session of Congress address on Tuesday. Democrats also revealed their own disarray, perhaps. It began, obviously, with Democrats abstaining from joining the president's procession down the chamber floor as Trump walked in.
Democratic Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury from New Mexico, among others in the room, held up signs that read, "This is not normal." Then, Texas Democrat Al Green heckled the president, yelling out, "You don't have a mandate," an outburst that prompted Vice President J.D. Vance to motion the Sergeant-at-Arms to remove Green. Several Democrats, including Representatives Jasmine Crockett, Jamie Raskin, and Maxwell Frost, trickled out of the chamber during longest presidential address in history. Those who stayed held up signs that read, "False," "Musk steals," "Save Medicare," and "Protect Veterans." Trump responded. Let's listen.
This is my fifth such speech to Congress. And once again, I look at the Democrats in front of me, and I realize there is absolutely nothing I can say to make them happy or to make them stand or smile or applaud. Nothing I can do.
Joining us now to drill down into the Democrats' reaction is former Democratic Senate candidate for Wisconsin, Stephen Olakara. Welcome back to Rising, Stephen. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, too. Thanks for having me.
Of course, great to get your reaction to what we heard last night, particularly the Democrats. Do you think the kinds of behavior that Al Green involved himself in, those little signs that got held up. Now, I don't actually think any of this matters. I'm not sure normal people are really paying attention so much to the State of the Union or the joint address or whatever we're calling it. But have the Dems found a good way to oppose or resist Trump in terms of the kind of theatrics we saw last night?
Among the Democratic leadership, no. I mean, if the face of your party can't be Al Green, he tried to attract attention to himself last night. And then previous to that, if you remember the protests outside the Department of Treasury, for example, Chuck Schumer taking front stage, that's not who you want as the face of your party. Now, I do think the Democrats made a really smart decision in selecting Senator Alyssa Slotkin from Michigan to provide the Democratic response. And she had, I think, a really smart, thoughtful message. She spoke to economic issues, pocketbook issues that I think really impact the majority of Americans right now, especially as the cost of many goods, including eggs and other goods, are going through the roof. You see that kind of message not gaining the kind of oxygen that it requires. It's not being talked about too much today because of people like Al Green. So no, I don't think him standing up and getting removed helped. I don't think the bingo paddles helped at all. I think it looks weak, it looks inept, and it looks disorganized. And I think Democrats at the leadership level need to just step back. They have been humbled over the last few months and let the next generation rise up.
And as President Trump asked in his speech last night, how could anyone possibly be opposed to any of this action that he is taking? Well, apparently, the modern-day Democrat Party could. The behavior of Democrats last night was completely disgraceful and demonstrated how severely out of touch they are with the American public. It was the most shameful moment in the history of presidential addresses in that beautiful chamber. In what was supposed to be a unifying moment for our country, Democrat members of Congress instead screamed at the President of the United States, who was just overwhelmingly reelected by their constituents, walked out of the chamber, and worst of all, they disrespected the American people. Democrats didn't stand to keep men out of women's sports. They couldn't even clap for a girl who got her head smashed in by a man on a volleyball court. Democrats didn't stand for an innocent and beautiful child who is surviving brain cancer. They opposed eliminating taxes on tips and Social Security. They didn't stand in favor of cutting taxes for hardworking Americans. They couldn't even clap for two mothers whose daughters were killed by illegal aliens. One of the only things that could get Democrats off their feet last night was cheering for Ukraine, not for America. Last night was a very clarifying moment for our country. The Democrats exposed themselves as the party of insanity and hate, the party that wants to put America last. They've allowed their Trump derangement syndrome to stop them from celebrating America and our people, and we will not allow them to forget that. And it's not just the Democrat Party. The mainstream media still doesn't get it. Last night, MSNBC's Nicole Wallace disgustingly looped in a 13-year-old boy with brain cancer into an attack on the president over January 6th.
Flashback.
Since that time, DJ and his dad have been on a quest to make his dream come true, and DJ has been sworn in as an honorary law enforcement officer actually a number of times. The police love him. The police departments love him. And tonight, DJ, we're going to do you the biggest honor of them all. I am asking our new Secret Service Director, Sean Curran, to officially make you an agent of the United States Secret Service.
End of Flashback.
I mean, if that doesn't melt your heart, like if you don't get chills up your spine, even having seen that already, like that hug, that moment, right? Like it's just so great and it's real. And what you had there were a whole bunch of decent people. Unfortunately, they were all Republicans because the Democrats did not applaud for that kid. Applauding just an absolutely beautiful moment, a kid who's surviving brain cancer. The hug, like it was just, look, I know it's theater in some sense, right? But sometimes some real things happen within that theater, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful moment. Rachel Maddow was less enthused about DJ.
For the record, and this is disgusting, the president made a spectacle out of praising a young man who thus far survived pediatric cancer, as if the president had something to do with that. This was in the midst of him praising DOGE. The DOGE cuts, among other things, have cut off funding for ongoing research into pediatric cancer.
She is so, I'll try to control myself, effing vile and disgusting. That was such a beautiful moment. And if your brain is so broken, it continued though. If you think MSNBC is vile, I mean they really topped themselves last night. Watch Nicole Wallace here. I'm gonna tip you off a little bit. She's gonna start making sense, and then, well, you just keep watching.
But I think this was a lesson in finding one thing that you let yourself feel. And I let myself feel joy about DJ. And I hope he's alive for another, 95 years, right? And I hope he lives and the life he wants to live. He wants to be a cop. He knows what he wants to do. And maybe when you have childhood cancer, that crystallizes for you. And I hope he has a long life as a law enforcement officer. But I hope he never has to defend the United States Capitol against Donald Trump's supporters. And if he does, I hope he isn't one of the 6 who loses his life to suicide. And I hope he isn't one who has to testify against the people who carried out acts of seditious conspiracy and then live to see Donald Trump pardon those people.
It's disgusting.
What a good-looking family, huh?
There's one more thing I got for you, a big hug.
Okay, good. That's very nice. Look at that family you got, huh?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Very nice. How are you? Nice to see you. Nice to see you. That was a big evening last night, right?
Yes, it was.
That was a big evening.
13-year-old superstar cancer patient DJ Daniel was made an honorary member of the U.S. Secret Service Tuesday. Despite that heartwarming tribute and moment, Democrats turned the cold shoulder. The White House says that snub certainly may have backfired.
Democrats didn't stand to keep men out of women's sports. They couldn't even clap for a girl who got her head smashed in by a man on a volleyball court. Democrats didn't stand for an innocent and beautiful child who is surviving brain cancer. Last night was a very clarifying moment for our country. The Democrats exposed themselves as the party of insanity and hate, the party that wants to put America last.
Former West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin and John Fetterman said this, sir. Thanks for being here. He said a sad cavalcade of self-owns and unhinged petulance. It only makes Trump look more presidential and restrained. We're becoming the metaphorical car alarms that nobody pays attention to, and it may not be the winning message.
Your party lost you because of what they were insisting on, and I believe we saw it the other night in how they handled the lack of decorum, how they handled that kid who everyone should have wanted to celebrate. What was your read on what is going on there and what it means about why you had to leave?
Well, it's so many reasons. Okay, we can get into the details, but let me just tell you, Chris, I kept thinking, my wife Gail and I were watching this, and we said, can you imagine if I was still there, I'd be the only one standing on that side if I was still caucusing with the Democrats. And I said, where have we gone as a nation? Only in Washington you see this type of inhumanity, disrespect, no decorum whatsoever. This is not America. It's not who we are. And the extremes on both sides are wrong. Hatred is the name of the game. You know, their business model is to make you afraid, so fear and hatred. And that's not who we are as this country. That's why I just couldn't be a Democrat any longer, and the working person doesn't really know, are we there for them or not? But on top of that, it's just, can't they say I made a mistake? And what I mean by that, the border. It was wrong what the Biden administration did at the border. With that, maybe they had good reasons, They just miscalculated and made a mistake. Own up to it. And just say, listen, I want to work with my Republican friends now to secure our border. I want to have legal immigration so we have people coming here to do the work that needs to be done. All these things they can do. I want to make sure that we get our financial house in order. We have basically $36.2 trillion of debt. And all I saw today on the television screen coming across was that the DOGE report has saved $692. $692. Every man, woman, and child is responsible for $104,000 of debt. So you know what? You're $103,000 plus change short if you want to think you're really helping. No one's talking about that. That'll be the harm for our country if we don't get our financial house in order. Nobody's talking about it.
Senator, how's it going? Johnny from Fox. What could Donald Trump do that'll make you clap?
Thank you very much.
What could Donald Trump do that'll make you clap?
I did clap when he said that the United States had supported Ukraine and given them lots of
Well, why not for Laken Riley's mom? How was that speech last night? Did you love it?
Well, I watched it. I don't think that was the best look for our party last night.
Very disappointing.
So you didn't stand up for anything?
The president got before the American people, didn't talk about how he could drive down grocery prices.
Senator, why weren't you standing yesterday for anything?
Very important hearing right now on anti-Semitism.
But you didn't stand for anything at the speech last
I don't know
night.
what you're talking about, where you got that information.
Well, there was nothing the president had to say.
Laken Riley's mom, you didn't stand for her.
Factual or truthful or anything like that.
We applauded.
You don't think it's worthy to stand up for her like everyone else?
We should applaud.
I need you to move.
Congressman, why didn't you stand for the speech?
Have a good day. I need to go to a meeting.
80% of the American people, according to CBS, loved the speech.
Again, I don't think with the United States.
Are the Democrats out of touch?
The United States of America. Forgive me for going here. Forgive me for being out of breath.
I don't know what speech they were watching.
They were watching the president's speech, Senator.
Really? It wasn't worth watching.
Why was Al Green so disrespectful?
You got to ask Al Green.
Why do you want men and women's sports?
Therefore, I
Senator,
need to go. Aloha.
Why do you want men and women's sports, Senator?
Thank you.
Congressman, how are you?
Okay, thank you.
Congressman, why should men be in women's sports?
Shorts?
Sports. Why do you think
they should not be in shorts?
Senator, why are we paying for Sesame Street in Iraq?
I do not know that is true, so I'm not going to say yes or no.
You don't trust the DOGE findings?
I don't really have an opinion on that. And I work in a business. I think it requires, we don't have to have an opinion on everything.
Do you have an opinion on Jesse Waters?
Oh yeah, I wish I had his hair. You know, yeah. And my dad's a big fan.
You need to get away from me.
Congresswoman, did you like the speech last night?
Awesome.
You were behaving like a fucking child.
And that's the game!
You've disconnected from the hive mind. Explain.